All right. I see. All right. So welcome, everyone. I guess I don't need to introduce myself, so I will skip that part. That's good. Besides working as a technical advisor for the FSFE, I'm also a software developer, so I know that side. But as I already mentioned, I'm here as a volunteer, so like I represent the FSFE as a volunteer. And the first question that you might ask yourselves when you think about licensing is, why do we need licensing in the first place? Why is that important? Well, it's easier than you might think to break the law without even realizing it. For example, you could do a git clone and then copy and paste, and you're probably already violating some laws. And that is because copyright covers every work out there. Pretty much anywhere in the world that's very well standardized around the world. There's different terminology, but it works very similarly around the world. And by default, copyright makes everything non-free. You're not allowed to do anything with it. Like, you're not allowed to use it or share it. Like, I mean, sharing is even crazier, but like, you're not even allowed to use it. And licenses are what give you permission to do things with any work. It doesn't have to be software. It could be, like, I don't know, like graphic, book, whatever. And a license is what allows you to do anything with it. And now non-free licenses will say all sorts of things. They don't even usually give you permission to use the program, for example, for any purpose. They might say, oh, only while you're a student or something like that. But this talk is not about any sort of licenses, but about free software licenses. And now I would like to clear up some basic terms first, so we all talk about the same thing. Now, what is free software? Free software is any software that gives you the right to use the software for any purpose, to study it and figure out how does it work, to share it, but also to improve it or just change it in general. So a free software license is any license that allows you to do these four things. And there's another term that's going to come up continually throughout the talk that is copyleft. And to a certain degree, this is like a play on words on the word copyright. So right and left is the joke. But it's also a neat little trick, a legal trick, to protect the four freedoms I just mentioned. So use, study, share, improve. And essentially what it does is it protects users' rights by saying you can use the code, but the condition to use it is that if you share it, you have to share it under the same conditions. And now in regards to licensing, to get an overview, like which licenses do you need to know and so on, and what's the difference, there's two axes that I would like to explain that I use to distinguish different licenses. And one axis is from permissive to copyleft. And this is a spectrum. There's not just, it's not binary, it's not one or the other. There's a lot of in between. And on the one end, you have permissive licenses, meaning they say, do whatever you want with this. And they even give you permission to remove the freedom. So you may receive it under a free license, and you have the freedom to change it, and to study it, and to use it, and to share it. But you might give it to someone else and say, I don't give you the freedom. And that's what permissive licenses do. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have strong copyleft. And that's what protects the freedoms. It says, well, if you share this, you have to share it under the same conditions. So you cannot take away the freedoms. And now some people, and this is why I make this distinction, why I think it's important, some people say, oh, the permissive licenses are the freer ones because they allow me to do anything I want. And I would say, I like to compare it to society, how we live in society, is I give up my liberty to remove your personal liberties. Like, I don't just, put chains on any of you or like, I don't know, remove your liberty in other ways, and you all do the same thing. That's the agreement we have with each other, and that's how we can live in a society. So we give up some liberties to be freer overall, and I think that's the same way copyleft works, by saying like, you can do pretty much anything with this except remove the freedoms. All right. And the other axis that I think is important in regards to licensing is what type of work do you want to license? There's code, documentation, and media are the three typical things. And documentation and media is pretty straightforward. And that is because the source is more or less the same as the output. Not always 100%, but close enough. Like even if you think of a book and you don't have the file as a text file, but you only have the printed book, it would be easy enough if you had permission to make changes, to type it up and make changes. So it's not quite the same, but it's close enough. And that means licenses that are most suitable for documentation and for media, they're a bit simpler, and they may also be a little bit easier to use if you want to share something like on social media or so on, because they're shorter and you can just say, hey, it's under this license, and it's on there and you're fine. Now code is a little bit more complicated because you have to define more stuff. You have to state very clearly, okay, what do I mean by source? What do you have to provide? What does this mean? Because otherwise you might just get a binary. By the way, is everyone here, like, I know this is about developer perspective, but who please raise your hand if I should explain the term binary in this respect, because I don't want to say like, oh, you receive a binary and then you don't know what I'm talking about. All right, then I won't explain it. So you might just receive a binary, and while you can make changes to binary, it's very difficult. And so you need to define, okay, what is the source code? What does it entail? Like there's even this term of complete corresponding source, and that includes more than just the source code. It means like the tool chain to build this and so on. And that makes the licenses longer, but it's also not as much of a problem in this case, because if you think about a program, how many lines of code does this have? A few more lines of license is not going to make a difference there, so it's fine. And you're not likely to share your code on social media and say, oh, I need this to be incredibly short. So this is the other axis. I'm going to group licenses by, and now you can use licenses that I will recommend for media. You can also use them for code, but I just wouldn't recommend it. It's possible, and maybe not the best idea. All right. So the first rule that I would say to apply to this, if you decide what should I do with licensing, is if you contribute to an existing code repository, the only real answer here is use license of the repo that they're already using. If you feel, oh, I don't like this license, they should change it, then please start a debate with them. Don't contribute code under different license and say, haha, I tricked you. That's not a good idea. Be a nice community member and use the license of the repo. And then there's the other question of, like, let's say you start something, you developed a piece of software and you want to put it out there and you want to do it right. Then there's for code. So these are licenses that I would recommend for code, even though they would work for media and documentation as well, but not as well. These are licenses that I would say you must know and I would recommend you use. The first one I want to mention is the GNU Affero General Public License. This is version 3 or any later version. This provides very strong copyleft, so this is the one axis I mentioned earlier. And it also covers network usage. So that means if you write a program and you publish it under this license and I run the software on a server and other people use it, these other people still have the right to get the source code from me. That's the main difference from other licenses in this case. And then the second one I would recommend, well, actually the AGPL is the one I would recommend for most cases, but that's a personal preference. Then the kind of classic in the licensing realm is the GNU General Public License, also here version 3 or any later version. And it's very similar to the AGPL. The two are mostly the same text. The only difference is the GPL doesn't cover network usage. So, for example, Google does this a lot. They run a lot of software under the GPL on their servers, and because it doesn't cover network usage, they don't have to publish that. Like, maybe you're a user of a Google service, but you don't have any rights to the code. If it were under the AGPL, you would have rights to the code. So that's the difference between those two. But they're both strong copyleft, so they both say you cannot remove the 4 freedoms. And then there's the LGPL, also version 3 or any later version. I'll explain in a second why I always put that there. Also a good license for code. It has what we call weak copyleft. That's where you see that this is a spectrum, because it allows some combination with non-free software. So in some cases, you maybe don't get all the freedoms that you would get if the program was under GPL. So, but strategically, this may make sense. I'll say something to how to choose that in a bit. Now, it always says, or any later version. You might ask yourself the question, why is that? And essentially, this is a way to make the licenses more compatible, because all of them say share under the same conditions. That would mean, like version 2 of the GPL, the Linux kernel is a very prominent example of this. They use version 2 only, which means they're incompatible with any software on a licensing level that uses GPL version 3. And by using or any later version as a license, so you don't just say GPL version 3, but GPL version 3 or any later version, you're compatible with later versions of the same license. And like now you see, like from, let's say, incredibly strong copyleft, weak copyleft, we'll get to the permissive end of the spectrum. And there I would say this is on the spectrum, last license you need to know and you should use maybe. If you want a permissive license, please use Apache 2.0. The reason is it's a permissive license, but it contains a patent grant. These all contain patent grants too, but here it's like, I'll mention one to contrast it in a second. A patent grant means, let's say a company contributes something to you and they do so under free license, but they don't give you a patent grant. Then you have a copyright license, but no patent license, which means they could still sue you for violating that patent. And if they contribute under Apache 2.0, that's not a problem, because the license says, well, this is not just a copyright license, you're also granting patents that may cover the same code. Now, there's a couple of licenses for code that I would say you should know, but please don't use them. And I'll explain why I think you shouldn't use them. Maybe there's a better alternative. One is the Mozilla public license. You kind of need to know it because of Mozilla, and it's very big there. And please don't misunderstand me. If you contribute to Mozilla, very much use this license. Stick with what they have. Don't try to change Mozilla. But the thing is, it's not very common outside of Mozilla, so that's a reason to maybe not use it. And it has a it's a weak copyleft license. It has a somewhat strange file-bound copyleft concept. And that's why I would usually, like if you write your own software and you want to publish it, I think there's just, it's not a bad license, but there's just better ones out there. Like use one of the ones from the list before. And the other one that I would say to please avoid, but you should know, is what I call expat, but you might also have heard about it as MIT or BSD. And they're very permissive licenses, they're very short, and that's why they're appealing to some people. And if you want to license your code permissively, please do so. But then please use Apache 2.0 because of the patent grant. That's the only difference between the two. They work the same way otherwise. But here you don't get a patent grant, and you really want this to be on the safe side. Now to move on towards the documentation and media part, I grouped the two together because they work roughly the same way. It's also must know and use. So these are the ones I would recommend. And generally, all the licenses that are going to come up here are from the Creative Commons family of licenses. So the one I would recommend is CC BY SA. So that means BY means you have to state who the author was or the authors. And SA means share alike. So under the same conditions. So again, copyleft license. This is also the license that Wikipedia uses, for example. So it's nice if you want a copyleft license. And if you want a permissive license, I would say go with CC BY. As you can see, the difference is quite easily distinguishable here with like the symbols. They do this very nicely. It just, the share alike is not there, so it doesn't have copyleft, so it's permissive. And these are very easy, like the reason I recommend those for media and documentation is because they're very easy to use. There's like one sentence that you put there, it's very easy to put on social media, like inside the graphic or something, and it's not like a page full of license. I mean, the actual license is longer, but the acceptable way to use those is to just have a very small statement. Now, in the area of documentation media, there's also a group of licenses that I would say, please avoid them because they have problems. Also from the Creative Commons family, and that is any license that has the ND, which is the no derivatives, because they're simply non-free. It means you cannot make any changes, so that's why I wouldn't recommend them, because changing is what we're all about in the free software community. And the other one that I would like even more so maybe please stay away from is non-commercial. So anything with NC. And the reason is non-commercial is, it sounds appealing at first to use this, but it's very hard to define. And it creates a lot of problems out there. Let's say someone runs a website and they're doing this, you know, as a hobby, but they have some links on there and they get some money from a company if someone buys something through those links. Then some lawyers would argue this is already commercial use, and so they cannot use your software. And because it's so hard to define what is commercial, like where does it start, I would really say to better avoid it. Also, it makes it non-free, of course. So just from that perspective, saying you can't use, because free software can be used commercially, and the documentation should allow that as well. There's one more license I want to mention, and I didn't group it in any of those, like either avoid or use, and it's the GNU Free Documentation License. And I only bring this up because I represent the FSFE, and this is from our sister organization, the FSF. It's one of the licenses, so I felt I should mention it at least. And sadly, I find the situation around the GNU FDL a little bit tricky. I think it's a very complex license for media and documentation. I mean, it was designed at a time when books were the primary form of publishing, and for that, maybe it makes a bit more sense. But I have to say, I find it unnecessarily complex. And it's also very easy to make it non-free. There's multiple ways where you can say, this is a part that you cannot remove or change. And then it means what you licensed with this becomes non-free. And this actually led to Debian, for example, to remove like they don't have documentation for Emacs because it's under this license and it has non-free parts in it. And I have some sympathy for it because the idea was we need to have a way for people to make political statements and statements of opinion in general, and they shouldn't be changed because there's a name attached to it. And so I understand what it's for, but I think it also, legally, I think it doesn't work, but they claim it does. And also, you're not allowed to attribute a statement to another person anyway. I can't say, you said something, you said something. So if I change a text that you wrote, I need to say, well, original text by, I made changes. So that's a thing anyway. So sadly, due to this complexity and due to it easily being non-free, I would say maybe avoid this license. Now there's another category that doesn't quite fit into like either code or like media documentation. It's maybe a config file or very minor stuff. I don't know, like, well, typically config files. And for that, there's another license that I wouldn't recommend anywhere else, but in this case, which is CC0. And what CC0 does is it makes everything as permissive as it gets, even more permissive than CC BY. So it essentially, you can see by the logo, it says public domain, meaning no copyright. That's not legally possible in many jurisdictions. But what the license does is it releases the work into the public domain wherever that's possible, and where it isn't, it grants all the rights that public domain would grant people. So it's as close as you get to public domain. But I wouldn't recommend it for anything that's, you know, where you feel like this is even slightly creative, where it's like, if it's a config file where you really say like, yeah, okay, it's just, everyone copies the same config file from somewhere else and makes a few changes. This is the license, but for everything else, I would use one of the others. Now, there's a couple of pitfalls around licensing. One is license compatibility. I already briefly mentioned this at times. Usually what you have is licenses will be compatible in the direction from permissively licensed code towards more copyleft. So that means if you develop software and it's, let's say, covered under the GPL, then you can take code that's licensed under Apache 2.0 and put it in your project, and that's fine, but not the other way around. And that's because you cannot remove the freedom from the copyleft licenses. And that's like license compatibility is one major pitfall, and the other one is writing your own license. Please don't ever do that. Like, if you feel the need to write your own license, please rethink that thought. It's there's plenty of licenses out there, and you know, you could say, like with software, I would say, oh yeah, it's cool. Like you're doing the same thing as another project, fine. But with licenses, the problem is they tend to be incompatible. So please don't, like, I know my free software journey started by reading the GPL and thinking, oh, I like this, but I would change a few things, and I didn't. So no skeletons in my closet, but I just want to stress this. Please don't write your own license. And now I would like to briefly talk about how to pick and use a license. Like what kind of thoughts go into that? And the first question is, do I want my work to stay free? Or do I just want to throw it over the fence and say like, here it is, and if someone else takes it and makes it non-free, I'm okay with it? Or another thought to go in there is like, do I see strategic use of my code also in non-free software? And the classic case here would be a media codec. Let's say you develop the next really efficient media codec where you can put like 4K or 8K streams or whatever in like really small bandwidths, and it looks super good, and everyone is like, wow, this is amazing. Then you might, and you want to release this as free software, you might want to release it under a very permissive license, and the reason is twofold. One, you want companies like Microsoft and Apple to incorporate that into their software, because the free software community as a whole will benefit, because you just want everyone to use the codec. And then people who want to use free software will find it anywhere online. They can easily stream stuff. They can easily produce videos or audio, whatever it is for, in that format, and then there's no conflict. So in that case, you might want to do that. And the other part of that is you want manufacturers that build hardware to be able to put that in their chips. So you can buy a player or a phone or whatever, and it will be able to not just decode that in software, but do this in hardware. And now, then once you've decided on a license, you want to state as clearly as possible what your intent is. So you could put it in a README file. The recommended way is to put it in all headers of all files. There's a tool from the FSFE, that's a bit small, sorry. Reuse, I will have a link up in a second. This is a tool that helps. I gave a talk on reuse last year. It will help you put licensing information in all your files. It can check that all your licensing information is complete, that you provide all the licenses and so on, and you follow best practice. That's pretty much it. Just make it as clear as possible. Licensing doesn't have to be hard. Just say, this is what I intend to do. Like, I want it to be under this license. It's very clear. Even if you don't follow best practice, if you state it strongly, it will hold up in court typically. Then some resources finally. There's the FSFE has an FAQ, a legal FAQ. There's also a mailing list where you can ask license questions. The FSF, so our sister organization in the US, they have a license list with comments on the licenses. So if you find some other license out there in the wild and you want to know, oh, what does this really mean? And you can find out, like, what are the differences to others? Is it compatible with other licenses and so on? And finally, reuse.software is the tool that I just mentioned, which helps you with licensing. And that's it from me. Yeah, say hello at the booth. It's like 1 floor down, and it's like 309, all the way in the back. Thank you. And I think we have 3 more minutes for questions, if there are any.
I think as for Mozilla Public License, new version 2.0, they actually have a secondary license, Mechanian, that you can transfer the license to GPL or LGPL. So based on this, do you still think we shouldn't use it?
Okay, my point was not that the Mozilla public license is bad or that it's completely incompatible. I'm aware of this clause. The reason I said don't use it, it's just not all that common. So there's hundreds of licenses out there, and you have to pick a few. And the way I did this is I tried to break it down to say, like, oh, you need to know 5, and they cover pretty much every use case. So there's no need for another one. So I think the MPL is okay, but it's not as common as some of the others, and it doesn't serve a different requirement.